Thank you so much for joining us. A huge crowd tonight. I'm not sure whether it's because of scams and influence, but I think there's a lot of people want to pick up some inside goss on just how to pull a scam on someone else. Get ready to poll because, yes, we are here to teach you defense of the dark arts. But at this point, I would like to introduce my partner in crime or in scam, Abby Wild, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, thank you.
What are scams? Just so we get a clear definition.
Yeah. So one of the things, quite quickly, when talking about scams, you realize there's a whole spectrum of behavior that people are talking about. So the technical definition, ACCC, is that it's about dishonesty and deception intentionally for financial gain or for potential financial gain, usually through identity information that can later be used for financial gain.
So you should have a poll come up on your screen, and it asks, have you been the target of a scam of some kind? So you should be able to just press and vote. Most people have been scammed, although we're sweeping between 4-5%. There's a few people who aren't sure whether they have been scammed. Is that consistent with most data?
Yeah, most of the research seems to be that most people have received scams of some kind.
This is by age, losses and reports. So losses in blue, reds are the reports of the losses. As you can see, under 18, not a big target market for money in that area. 18 to 24, they're starting to creep up, and then you hit your 20s and bang, it goes from there. And these are the people that report losses in the millions. And as you can see, towards 55, 64, why would that be a strong target market, Abby?
Yeah, as you can see, this is, and this is also the time where you start seeing the losses exceed the reports. And the average loss that happens at that point when people get scammed is higher because they're usually targeting, it's often investment scams, but things that tend to have a higher amount lost when people are targeted.
All right, we've got a new poll here. Have you suffered loss from some kind of scam? Yes, no, or I don't know. So, what is interesting about this is the difficulty in getting accurate data. Abby.
Yeah, it's really hard to get accurate data on scamming, partly because there's often a bit of stigma associated with admitting loss. And so it's one of the reasons people think people don't come forward when they've been scammed is often because they feel foolish. But it's also that often people don't know if they have been scammed.
Explain what we're looking at here. This is an optical illusion. Many of you have seen it before.
Yeah, how many of you before have seen the Mueller-Lyer line test? Right, so if you've seen this test before, you know that these two lines are equal length.
So it's a visual trick. It will always be a visual trick. It will always present something that baffles us, but we override our instincts and we know we're being tricked. And these are some of the techniques that we'll be talking about in overriding scams, understanding how our brains are tricked. Top scams by loss reported to ScamWatch in millions. Investment scams, straight up the top, bang.
Yeah, investment scams. One of the things that struck us as particularly sinister about investment scams is once people successfully scam someone with an investment scam, they on-sell their number so that then they're on a list where they're targeted more and more for investment scams, particularly when they've most suffered loss. So they're most responsive to having another chance to regain some of that deep loss. And so you end up in these kind of cycles of scamming. That's quite sinister.
By gender, women and men, so mainly they fall into women get hit with dating and romance scams?
Yeah, there is a bit of a difference in the distribution of susceptibility to different scams, but one of the things that we think is interesting just with the gender and with the age is that almost everybody is targeted, and like different sort of formulas for scams appeal to different audiences. And people have found quite a range.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the distraction principle.
Yep.
Yeah. The
sexy swindler.
Sexy swindler.
Yeah.
Or the lower 5 version, you know, the classic I tap the window, Jeff steals your handbag from underneath the table.
Yeah. So distraction's a key part of this.
Yeah.
Deference to authority. Hello, this is the Australian Tax Department. You owe us a debt. We fear authority or we have deference to it. Need or greed?
Yeah, I mean, when Jeff was mentioning about the romance scams earlier, this is a classic version. So almost all con men will talk about how all people have something that's important to them or something that they want. And if they can figure out what that is, you will be willing to give something for that. And so this is part of getting at that core motivation that a person has. And so as with the romance example that Jeff was using is a great one where at first you target something like the need for companionship, but then quite quickly, actually the real motivation for her was the financial security for her children. And so that then becomes the lever that you use to get someone to take an opportunity that seems promising. And so that's really the attempt to find the core motivation for the particular person that you're scamming.
Social proof, what's that?
Yeah. It's mostly about safety in numbers. Well, with your Belle Gibson example, it makes you feel that she's probably been vetted, so that when you have the opportunity to donate, you feel that, oh, I'm sure that this is something legitimate. She wouldn't have all this recognition if this was not real.
Urgency principle.
Yes, I mean, as with your fake Ray-Bans, so that the 3 hours left, or 2 hours, or this offer for your updated iPhone expires, like these kind of things to get you to act quickly.
The shaming principle, this is tricky.
Yeah, so this is where the scammer will use anything dishonest that you have done against you to make it more difficult for you to seek help or to get support.
And deception, finally.
Yeah, just the idea that people are not who they say they are, and that in almost all scams, people are trying to pass themselves off.
I had a call from Officer Owen Campbell from the Australian Tax Office, and the only thing that gave it away was the thick Russian accent. All right, so top contact methods by reports, again from ACCC. Nearly half are by phone still. About nearly 25% by email, and they're still losing 30 and 25 mil respectively. About 15% by text. That's a growing area, is that right?
Yeah. I was super surprised that phone is still so far ahead of the other ones. Yeah. But yes, yeah.
And social media, it's not even 4%, but it's got quite a effective loss rate there of 15.7 million.
Yeah. Social media tends to be where you often are getting contacted by someone who you do know, and it's usually a multi-step process, but that's often how they get into your identity information, so it's more effective.
Okay,
Yes,
one of the famous liars in the world. Tell us about this study. Yeah.
So actually, the 2016 Ig Nobel Prize for Psychology went to a paper that is called From Junior to Senior Pinocchio, a cross-sectional lifespan investigation of deception. But there were two important findings. One, disappointing for parents, which is that lying is an important sign of good cognitive development. So you're like,
Smart kids lie.
smart kids lie.
Yeah.
And then the second finding is that lying is an inhibitory function, so it's quite cognitively demanding for the same reasons that we were talking about with dissonance before. You're forced to hold competing versions of the truth as you speak, and for that same reason, it often means that there are bodily tells, even as your narrative can stay tight.
Freud, what does Freud say? If his lips are silent, he chatters with his fingertips.
Yeah, so same idea, that it's your body often has tells, even if you can keep your script down about the lie.
We sometimes overestimate our ability to be suckered in and to get out of a scam. Yeah.
And this is one of the things that people are very, statistically they would say overconfident about their ability to pull out before they give information that's a loss. And so that's one of the forms of overconfidence.
A formula for the susceptibility to scamming. How does this work?
Yes, social scientists do math. But yeah, so the idea is that when you look at all the literature about what makes people susceptible to scams, it tends to be four things. So some of them are the traits of the individual, and this is often what we focus on when we talk about things like age and gender, and as well as personality types, and whether that makes a greater propensity to be scammed. But it's also the state, the mood that you're in, how tired you are, whether you're in debt, things like that are also important. And then the context as well. And the case of the mobile phone has both that state and the context, because quite often with phones they found that people are often moving between spaces. They're reading something on the train, they have short periods of time, and so again it has to do both with the context and the state of distractedness that makes scams more successful. And the final one is the influence technique, which is sort of what we were talking about before when we were looking at the persuasion principles behind scams. So the way that they are, and that's where it also does cross over to that phrasing of the message that many people selected, which the kinds of things that they're trying to play on as they're communicating the scam.
What's the image that we can see here, by the way?
Yeah, so this image is actually from the Take 5 campaign that the UK introduced as an anti-fraud measure. And after looking through all the research, the single finding that they distilled was that the most important thing is for there to be a pause between when you are introduced to an offer and when you decide whether to act on it. And that single rule saves most people from making mistakes.
So the key is slowing down. Mm-hmm. Don't be sped into making a decision to committing information or money. The buddy system, which is basically bouncing ideas off other people.
Yeah, making sure you talk to other people about decisions, especially about investments that you're thinking about making. Yeah.
They say in many dating and romance scams, if people had been able to show the text, the letter, or something to someone else, they would have gone, actually, I don't think it's true. You just need someone outside your head to help you make that decision. And personal info, keep it personal.